Okay, so I'm going to group together some of the feedback so that we can go through some of it, but I suggest reading through, each individual thing that was here. Remember that the reason why we wrote these specific issues was because they showed up on our surveys the most often. And it's not about a right-wrong thing. Remember the Disney example? It's certainly not their fault that people lock keys in the car or people forget where their car is. But the deal is they have a bad experience. It's the last experience that they had, and they won't come back to the park if that's the case. And so Disney says, hey, I don't care what it takes, I want them to come back to the park. And that's really what we're talking about. We want people coming back to our park. We want people doing real estate with us over and over again. So there was a central theme around some expectations and some organizational things that several of the offices worked on. I'll start with Crofton, where I was, which was a perception that the agent was unorganized. And how could that possibly happen? And, here's the things that Crofton came up with. The first impression lasts forever. You've got to make the right impression. You've got to have that expectations set right up front. Be there now. That's a great thing that they came up with. Be in the moment with those people. You've got a million things going on, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's with other clients. That person right there that's there to make one of the biggest decisions in their lives doesn't care. And they don't need to know about all those other things. Find a way to spend, if it's an hour or 3 hours or 5 hours, give those 5 hours to those people. Big thing that they mentioned, hey, schedule the admin time and stick to it. You've got to find your time to get your paperwork, your different ducks in a row, and you've got to stick to that. Put it into your calendar. Always previewing the property whenever possible. Knowing the directions. If you don't know the directions and you get lost out there, that can make you look unorganized. So how do you get all that stuff done? Well, one of the phrasing that they came up with that I liked was, I work with many clients, and in my experience, this is what works best. Let's figure out how you and I can work in a situation, something like that. Would it work for you? So in other words, get that phrasing in so that you can make people feel comfortable that you do this all the time, and you're the one that knows how this works best, and you want to work with them in a way that matches that so that you can deliver that same type of experience. McLean talked about the people writing, hey, the agent was too busy or had too many other clients that they were working with. Hey, I hope that that's a problem that we all have to figure out how to solve. First of all, the words too busy never should be used. I like what they said. Hey, I'd love to help you at that time. Unfortunately, I already have a prior commitment. How can we make another time work? That's much better than saying I've got other clients or I'm too busy. They talked about all the things that we just spoke about. Conducting a formal buyer consultation. Using the folders, things that we've talked about before. McLean came up with a great list of questions, and I suggest that you read through their questions, and if their questions don't work for you, write your own questions. But know the questions that you're going to ask with every client in any chance that you can get. You want to have that first impression, and you want to establish things like, what's the best time for their availability, how do they prefer to be communicated with. Set all of that up front and make it routine. I don't care if you have to write them down and go through that. I think I would certainly feel like the person knows what they're doing if they're going through a checklist with me. Get that done up front. And I know, because I went to McLean a couple months ago and everybody looked at me like, I was an alien saying, hey, we don't sit down in the office in a set room for a half an hour. It just doesn't work that way, Scott. Sometimes we're at Starbucks, sometimes they're in California. That's okay. If you have your system and your thing that you want to plug them into, find the 90% solution. Get 90% of your clients doing it exactly the way that you want them to do it. And if you have any questions about that, we have somebody inside the company. I had a chance to speak with Jim Sandage, and man, does he do that with every one of his clients. And he's got great results. I mean, he really handles a large caseload, but he plugs them into that equation. And I think it's, your wording, your phrasing up front, that you know what you're doing and you want them to have this great experience, and because you want them to have that great experience, you're going to plug them into your system. And set that expectation and work well with people that way. La Plata talked about a common thing that we see on a survey, which is, the agent was on the phone the entire day. And, first of all, you can't be on the phone the entire day. And I know our business, but if you've scheduled your admin time and you've set expectations with people that you're going to get back to them in a certain time frame, then you don't need to take every phone call. And if there are things going on that day that hey, I really may have to jump into a couple phone calls, then tell the client up front and ask their permission before that phone call comes. Say, hey, I'm not going to take every phone call today, but there's 1 or 2 phone calls that are really important, they're transactional, and I've got to take them, and is it okay with you if I take a brief moment and answer a few phone calls when those come in? The rest of them, they had suggestions, and McLean had suggestions. You can text somebody back. I got your phone call. I'm with a client now. I'll return your phone call later today. There's ways to make people feel comfortable that you're on it without having to jump on the phone in the middle of it. La Plata mentioned, make that customer feel like they're the only customer. Goes back to that feeling of be there now. Be there in the moment with that customer. Make them feel special. Make them feel like they have your undivided attention. Fredericksburg, they dealt with the same problem but just slightly different. What do you do for your listings? Why do people write in the listing feedback sometimes, hey, I had this great appointment with the agent, they told me all the things that Century 21 New Millennium was going to do, and then I felt like, they just sort of disappeared and they didn't do much. Well, we probably didn't do enough to tell them, how does this process work? Sign that listing, and then once you sign that listing, you need to go through the list of expectations. Hey, you're going to hear from me once a week, and, in that feedback, I'm going to tell you, anybody that's come through the property, know that I'm always going to chase down anybody that's ever been through your property. If you're chasing down the agent and you can't get any that showed your property and you can't get any feedback from them, tell the client, hey, I know this agent showed it, I've been trying to get their feedback, and I will keep on top of that for you. Make sure that client feels that you're the one that's chasing it down. If you can't get the other person to respond, make sure that they know that. A lot of things came up. Simple stuff. Your brochures. That can be a problem. If your brochures are stale, they have the old information on them because you had a price reduction, or if you've run out of information, those need to be updated every 2 weeks. You need to make sure that there's fresh, recent, current brochures in that property. Send them all of the websites that they're listed on. Make sure that they know. Make sure that they understand that we've put them into all these different areas. Providing feedback's huge. I can tell you that a simple thing that was done that was, talk about a rocket science conversation. I just did a referral where I used a personal friend of ours that's up in New Jersey, and he was actually one of my dad's first agents, and that's really the reason that I chose him. But that said, he goes to work on this referral, and I noticed that he copied the referring agent, myself, our coordinator. He copied everybody into simple stuff. Here's what the brochure looks like. Here's the virtual tour. Am I understanding that we're not going to do a disclosure statement on this because it's a foreclosure? You have to send that email anyway. Why not let everybody know that you're active on this thing and you're doing all the things that are necessary to make sure that this has a good chance of selling. So listings, it's about communication. Remember that that person isn't going to see you face to face as much anymore. So finding a regular communication at a minimum of a week, is important. But then all of the little things that you do, CC. Just make sure that everybody has a copy. Everybody knows that you're on it and you're moving it forward.